This happened 7 years ago when I was a little more naive and 30 pounds lighter. Still, just as short though. It was a week before Christmas and I was finishing up my shopping. My mother, aunt, and Nana are all big lottery people, so I tend to get them scratcher tickets and season tickets as gifts. I don't gamble really, so it's my one time buying them in a year. I always go to the same place down the street from me, and I wouldn't say I live anywhere dangerous. Not gated community level, but like a solid, children can walk around alone in dusk. Now I had an old Saab that was the classic, no one can drive her but me level of finicky. Sometimes, she just wouldn't start unless she held down the brake and shifted through the gears, then put it in park, pushed really hard, and turned the key. It took forever to figure out the special secret handshake. The roof needed to be manually put back up if you had put it down. Like, it fell on your head. Not a design feature. And just a lot of wonky stuff. My brother, who was a lunatic with toxic rage issues, but that's a different story, had broken the handle to my passenger side door right before this, after picking him up from scaring children at the hospital, so you couldn't open that door at all anymore. To get in the passenger side, you were either Dukes of Hazzarding it or going through my side. So, it's Christmassy. A bit of snow and sludge, but pretty normal day. I go to the gas station to get my tickets, cash only, so enough money to make my purchase in hand. There are a few people behind me in line, and a few people playing Keno in the sitting area. There's one wiry guy behind me to the side in line, but I didn't notice much other than he was a little closer than I would personally have liked. I make my purchase, several $20 scratch tickets. They don't want anything less, bad odds apparently. A couple year-long season tickets, adding up to just over $400. I pay the cashier and head out to my janky little Saab. I sit down, close my door, don't lock it, and begin to count and organize my change and everything. Not even 35 seconds later, the wire man comes out and walks by my car. As he does, he stalls just for a second and tries my passenger side handle. It doesn't work and just makes a clunk as the handle is sort of free moving. It doesn't connect to the mechanical stuff at this point. My heart dropped and my stomach got sour. My body knew to panic, but my head hadn't caught up. He immediately keeps going. Walked out of the parking lot and down the sidewalk. Until I thought about it later and had told other people, I didn't even consider that the man was probably going to rob me, or worse. I now very religiously follow the 45-second rule and am a lot more vigilant while Christmas shopping. No one won anything from those tickets I risked my life for. This story was when I was younger and braver. Kinda did stupid stuff without thinking. It's a wild ride, and it's all true. I used to work at a pizza shop down the street from 2 p.m. until they closed. I usually didn't get off until 11 or so at night. I had a car, but was close enough to walk, so I did that most days to save gas. This particular night, I was doing my usual thing, jamming to one of my playlists. Tired, but happy to have a good job, and just generally happy with the way that my life was going. Up ahead, about a block from my place, I see an attractive guy in dark clothing walking, but not with a purpose really. He was taller than me, maybe 5'10" to 6 foot, and had shaggy brown hair. The closer I got to him, the more I could tell that he was really good looking. Like, even in the dark of night, I was starting to get excited. His features kind of escape me now, but I do remember his hair and his thick eyebrows. I took an earbud out. Because I'm from a dangerous city and never really cared about stranger danger, I decided to talk to him, maybe even flirt for a little bit. How's your night going? It's good, just looking to get drunk. Oh, that I can help you with. I got a mini bar at my place. I live just down the street. That was not verbatim. During the walk back to my place, I got no red flags from this guy. He seemed totally normal, and I was honestly thinking, wow, just through sheer luck, I met a super hunky guy, and he seemed cool and fun. I was beside myself really. So we get to my apartment on the second floor. I jump into host mode and offer him to take a seat and make himself comfortable. The apartment is about 640 square feet, so it's very small. Except for the bathroom, you can see the rest of the apartment from any area. I head into the kitchen, and while I'm pouring drinks, I glance back over at him. It was then when I noticed the first red flag. As I was asking him questions, he is more delayed in his answers, especially more so than he was on the walk over here. It was just odd to me. I go back over to the couch, pass him his drink, and sit down next to him. "So what do you do for work?" I asked. "Oh, I'm not here for sex." He puts his drink down on the table. "What do you mean? I'm not after sex either." He stands up. "What you got?" he asked me. His nice guy and friendly face are gone now. I'm having a hard time processing what he means by this. I said, "What you got?" The second I stand up, he pushes me back. I fly across the room, hitting the floor, but not hard enough to pass out or anything. I get right back up, but he's already grabbed my laptop and my work bag. As soon as I start towards him, he cuts around me and makes his way to the front door. I'm right behind him when he makes it outside. I manage to grab a hold of him and tussle again, in front of the door. Now I shout out, calling on help from the neighbors. It's late at night, so no one comes. I'm shouting, "Please help, I'm being robbed." The thing is, he has my laptop. It's not just any laptop. I hate to admit it, but my entire life work was on that laptop at the time. Important photos that I didn't have backed up. Thousands of dollars in music programs. Video game programming stuff for a development team I helped. Really expensive software, etc. It was, in my mind, irreplaceable. I gave chase downstairs, across the dog walk park, and started to gain on him. We tussle again, and the only thing I could focus on is my laptop. I knew that I had to, at any cost, get my laptop back. That was absolutely all I cared about. Somehow I get grip on my laptop. I tug it again, and I guess he decides I'm not worth all the struggle. He gets up and starts to take off. I now realize that he still has my work bag. It has my cell phone and wallet, with my license, debit card, AAA card, etc. I take off towards him again, and this time he shouts back at me, "Follow me and I'll stab you again." This makes me stop in my tracks, and he gets away. Underneath the street lamp along the sidewalk, I immediately inspect myself. Was I stabbed? No way. There's no way. Then I see blood running down my leg. I see blood on my arm, 2 places where he cut me good. I'm scared, but the blood makes it look worse than it is. I decide that's enough. I got my laptop, and that's all I really wanted anyway. I hobble back to my home and get inside and lock my door. I called the cops using my neighbor's friend's phone the next day and filed a police report explaining the situation, showing the stab wounds, and declining medical services. I can't afford that, and I was fine, all things considered. So all the guy got was a crappy cell phone and a wallet with like $30 to $40 in it. The cop called my friend back several days later and said they were not able to find the guy and that he would keep me posted. This was years ago, so I don't know where the robber is now, but I have every electronic thing of importance backed up on multiple drives to this day. So this happened years ago when I was a dumb teen girl who loved walking the city alone after dark. This took place in Eastern Europe, for context, in a city with a tramway system. On this night, I sat at the tram station waiting to catch the last tram home. 3 trams stopped at the station, 2 of which went where I was going. Important info for later. It was around 10 p.m., and as I sat there waiting, lost in thought, I barely registered a man quickly walking up and standing by the shelter. I thought nothing of it, just someone else waiting for the tram. Until I started feeling weird. The streets were quiet and dark, and there was no one else in sight. Just me and the sky. I started wondering why he chose to stand so close to me when he had so much space to avoid dealing with people. I couldn't comprehend anyone wanting to socialize this late at night, given that I'm not very social myself. So I glanced at him, trying not to overthink it. He was a bald-headed, beady-eyed giant, tall and built like a bear, big belly, and big arms and legs. I was 5'2" and scrawny, but that wasn't what scared me. It was the fact that he was staring right at me, unblinking and expressionless, not even attempting to look away or act embarrassed. This guy wanted me to feel uncomfortable. I instantly felt weak and shaky, cold shivers down my spine. This was not normal. I quickly realized that this was not a good situation. I couldn't miss my last tram. Walking home was out of the question, and my phone was almost dead. I was a shy kid and didn't have what it takes to scare this guy away. I knew that, but I had to at least try. I only managed to utter out a small, "Hi," trying my best to startle him out of whatever he was thinking, but my attempt failed. In the face of a silent, threatening aura, he kept staring, no sign of intent to reply. He was enjoying this. Feeling the panic rising inside me, I told myself to stay calm and think rationally. Maybe he didn't hear me. Minutes passed. His stare continued to burn my skin, and there was no tram in sight. Ignoring him did not work, so I mustered up the courage to speak once again, this time louder. "What do you want? Stop staring." No answer. He definitely heard me this time. I felt myself start to get angry. I didn't want to let this guy get to me anymore. I didn't want to continue to give him the satisfaction of watching me squirm nervously and pretend that his behavior didn't bother me. I took a deep breath and forced myself to start thinking. I knew what I couldn't do. I can't fight him off if he makes a move, and there's nothing I could say or do that will get him to stop. I didn't know what his intentions were, but I knew they weren't good. If I tried to walk away, he would probably follow. I could run, but he would most likely catch up with me before I could tire him out, since his legs were much longer than mine. Even if I managed somehow to lose him, walking home through those dark alleys past junkies and gypsies that were always prowling about could land me in even a worse situation. I could pretend to call someone, but he might be compelled to act much sooner if he felt threatened. So, what can I do? The only realistic thing I could do was to try to outsmart him somehow. So I started developing a few plans, depending on which tram showed up, trying to confirm if he was just amusing himself and actually wanted a tram too, or popped over for another, more suspicious reason. I couldn't let him see where I lived, so if he followed me, I would have to prepare to employ whatever strategy available, and for that, I needed to stay rational and aware of my surroundings. While I was still thinking, the first tram showed up. It was one I could have taken home, but this one pulled into the depot in my neighborhood, forcing me to lead him to my home. I hoped that he would board it and leave me be, but he didn't. He kept watching me carefully. I let the tram go, desperately hoping it wasn't the last one to head home. He continued to watch, and I sensed that he was quite happy with how things were going. I put up with it for another 15 minutes, trying to focus on another plan of action. I could now pretend that I needed the other tram, the one going to a different area of the city, and just ride it to the next station, get off as soon as possible so I didn't end up too far and miss the tram I needed. This tram showed up next. With my heart in my throat, I boarded it and sat down by the door. He got on it too, but sat himself in the back pretty far from where I was. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking this might still go well. When the tram reached the next station, I got up and out, not looking back, hoping that it was all over. But when I stepped on the pavement and watched the tram drive away, I couldn't see him in it. I turned my head slowly and was terrified to see him walking towards me, looking slightly pissed off. He stopped just a few feet away and resumed staring, this time with a clear hint of malice, still in silence. My vision blurred as I fought back tears of despair. He was not going to let me go. The helplessness I felt was unbearable, but I couldn't cry. I couldn't give up. I had to find a way. I had to get home tonight. The prospect of what might happen to me any time now if I didn't was becoming too real. My head was full of unanswered questions, regrets, and horrible scenarios. I wanted so badly to not have to think anymore, to not have to fight back the tears and stay composed. But I knew this would be his cue to enact whatever fucked up plan he had in mind. I couldn't let that happen. Then I saw the final tram approach, the one I could take now, and got on as quickly as my trembling legs would allow me. When I was in, bright lights enveloped me. My mind snapped out of the nightmare spiral of fear and allowed me a moment of clarity. I had 3 stops to figure this out. I sat down at the front and looked at the driver. He was a frail old man, blissfully unaware of my distress. Getting the driver's attention was a no-go. We passed 1 stop, and there was no one else waiting to climb aboard. I turned around fully expecting to see the psycho had followed me again, but I did not expect him to be sitting right behind me. He was not taking any chances. He was making sure that I wouldn't try anything like last time. I shot him a hateful glare and allowed my anger to overcome my fear. I stood up and purposely walked over to another seat in the middle of the tram car. I wanted to make it clear I would not put up with this BS any longer. He got up too, and slowly walked to a spot 2 seats behind and diagonally from me, then sat down with the tiniest arrogant grin on his face. Already expecting it, I shot up and stood by the middle door instead, determined to keep him on his toes. If I stood right by the door, he wouldn't have any idea which station I planned to get off at. He remained where he was this time, convinced that I was bluffing. After all, this was really the last tram. There was nothing else that I could possibly do to escape now. He must have reckoned. So my defiance was just a funny act to him. This was my last chance. I had to take a risk. It had to work. There were 3 doors on the tram, and they all opened and closed at the same time, and stayed open for about 5 seconds before closing again if no buttons were pressed or people detected on the threshold. The next stop, the only one left before mine, came into view. The tram slowed to a stop. The doors opened. I made no move. 5 seconds passed. The doors started to close. I bolted out and ran for it, reaching the back door as fast as I could and slamming the button to open it again. My whole body was tense with adrenaline. I waited a long, painful second and jumped back in, keeping my head low, holding my breath, and crouching behind the nearest seat. I shut my eyes tightly and exhaled slowly, while thanking the gods I didn't believe in for the button working, and wishing with all my might for him to not have seen me before I got back in. As I was waiting to hear footsteps approaching, I pictured him frantically looking for me. Was he still on the tram, a face screwed up in anger, head turning like a fat ugly meerkat? Or was he catching his breath on the pavement of the last station, mad eyes searching the darkness for me? As the tram continued the loud journey, banging and clanking in sync with my heartbeat, I dared smile to myself, imagining his face when he realized he fucked up. Hand on my chest, I did my best stealthy look around the corner, and found no one looking back. I stood up in excitement and threw myself at the foggy back window. There he was, standing alone and victimless on that slow, fading out of sight station, watching me leave him and his vile plans behind. Giving someone the middle finger never felt so good. I made it home and told no one my story for fear that I'd be admonished for being so naive. But I was safe. I was proud of myself, and I learned my lesson. Creepy stranger, I hope the events of that day taught you not to underestimate girls and prevented you from being a criminal for the rest of your life. Let's never meet again. This may very well not count as mysterious, I guess, but it gave me a weird gut feeling. It happened around this time of year, so I had a flashback on it recently. I can't make sense of this incident, but it creeped me out. Around this time of year back then, I would walk a bike path daily to this little man-made waterfall and back. It ventured through several parks and was overall in a pretty urban area. It was around 3 to 4 p.m. The bike path dips several times under street overpasses, and it's always a little spooky and sketch directly in the center of the dip, since it's like you're in a tunnel created by the overpass up ahead. Anyways, I was walking down the dip, and I hear a bike coming down the hill fast behind me. I step further to the right, but don't look back, and was startled at the fact the cyclist practically grazed me as it passed instead of giving me a wide berth. I was kind of flustered and annoyed. It all happened so fast. Then the woman stopped a bit ahead of me and started to look back at me, and I thought, oh shit. But when she looked up in my direction, I realized the cyclist was actually a large child that I had mistaken for an adult. It was still kind of dark where she stopped, so I couldn't fully see her expression, but she stayed still with her head facing me for several seconds. I could tell by her silhouette that she was indeed staring back at me. She was just frozen and silent, propped up on the bike with her foot out, and it creeped me out. I wondered if maybe she was nonverbal and just expressing frustration about her near collision in the only way she knew how. Anyway, I stopped walking towards her because it felt a little eerie, and I gently waved or something in acknowledgement. I don't think I said hi or anything. I don't really remember. Anyway, she suddenly turned and pedaled off in the same direction I was headed in. She wasn't with an adult or anyone that I could see. I kind of stopped thinking about it as I walked, as she just seemed like an annoyed kiddo. But as I got to the end of the trail, I noticed something under my car. The trail meets up with a public parking, which happens to be a public school lot. It briefly borders the parking lot, so I could see something under my car as I approached. I realized it was a bike, and to this day I'm 95% sure that it was the girl's bike. It was under the back of my car, like someone tried laying down flat and shoved it under there. I still feel extremely disturbed remembering it because I can't for the life of me think of an explanation behind any of this. At the time, I was worried that someone in the lot was watching me as I noticed the bike and removed it. But I didn't see anyone or have any problems as I left. I just leaned the bike against the tree and bailed. I didn't pay close attention to too many details about the bike when I saw the girl because it was such a brief encounter. But I remember thinking it looked like a drab because it was white on white on gray, or something very plain and not typically girly. I guess I could be wrong about it being her bike, and it could have been a coincidence. But it was just so strange, and I wanted to share my story on Reddit. If anyone can tie this together, or if I'm just overthinking it, please let me know. So the other day I was out getting food, and when I was ordering, this guy came up to me and told me that he was homeless and asked if I would buy him something to eat. I said yes and asked him what he wanted, but he didn't want anything from where I was ordering and asked me to follow him until he could decide what he wanted. At this point, I felt a bit uncomfortable and said that I was sorry, but I didn't have enough time to follow him, and he just left, and that was that. It doesn't seem like much, but I should add that when I was ordering food, he was asking me how old I was, if I was meeting anyone, if I was single, and if my boyfriend was around when I told him I wasn't single. I kept looking behind me on the way home, but I don't know. Maybe he was just over friendly or flirty, or was it something more sinister? I'm from the UK, if that's any context. So way back in 2016, when the whole killer clown epidemic was huge, I was walking through the woods around 10 p.m. alone in order to get to a party that was happening in a secluded part of the forest. It was almost pitch black, and I could barely see in front of me besides the flash from my phone, and everything seemed normal as I was walking to the party. I got to a long stretch of woods with no defined path, but since it was the quickest way to the party, I took it. As I got around midway through, I heard something to my left. I turned and saw a shadowy figure sat on a fallen log. I was understandably unnerved, but I couldn't make out if it was just a shadow from the moonlight or if it was an actual person. I made the mistake of shining my phone light directly at it, and I was instantly terrified. Sat there, alone in the middle of the woods, was the largest man, dressed as a clown, with full face paint, and sporting the creepiest smile imaginable. I tried to call 5 different people as I was passing him, and then I heard him get up behind me. I instantly started sprinting towards the end of the long stretch, onto the path which had a barbed wire fence down the side of it. During the sprint, I was pretending to be on the phone with one of my friends, as I could hear him running after me, but there was no chance in hell that I was going to turn around to see if I was right. When I got to the path, I jumped over the fence as fast as I could. I sliced my hand open as I did so. I turned around and kept running backwards as I saw the clown. He stood behind the fence staring at me with that same smile. I didn't stop running until I got to the party, and I was scared for a very long time after this. You have to bear in mind that at this time there are many rumors of people being killed by people dressed up as clowns, and while I'll never know if this man had evil intentions or was just trying to scare me, it was extremely strange and scary to live through. So in conclusion, Killer Clown Man from the woods. Let's not meet. So, a little background. My friend and I decided at 10 p.m. we would park our car at the local park. It's usually pretty safe, and we've been there many times, sometimes by ourselves. I'm a dude 5'7", and my friend is a girl 5'2". Usually we sit in there and talk or listen to music. This particular night though, we had parked in somewhat of a darker area. Keep in mind this parking lot is pretty big, and there's already about 6 to 7 cars in there. I'm in the driver's seat and my friend is diagonally across from me in the back seat. I notice a guy parking maybe 6 spots away from my car. The man gets out and is casually checking out my car. He starts walking through the park a bit, visibly getting closer, but eventually veers off. I don't think much of it, until 15 minutes later he comes back, but this time is closer than before and is visibly trying to see inside. My friend is trying to calm me down, letting me know that there's nothing to worry about. He eventually gets back in his own car. At this point, I'm kind of keeping an eye on him. When he gets into his car, he backs out and parks right next to another car, only to get out and scope inside his car. He gets back into his car and then parks right next to us. This parking lot is huge, and there are plenty of empty spaces. At this point, my friend is aware. We both are staring daggers into this man, and he looks at us, looks away, looks back at us, looks away until he turns his car off. He then gets out of his car right outside of the door my friend is at, and is just staring at us. Both of us are confused and obviously creeped the fuck out. He was kinda older and completely by himself. While he's standing out there, he's shuffling a bit, with the biggest smile on his face, never breaking eye contact. He gives us a very weird wave, almost non-visible. At this point, it's been about 3 minutes of us having this weird long-ass staring competition. Our body language and facial expressions should have been more than enough for this guy to know that we did not enjoy his presence. My friend is feeling a bit uncomfortable, so I start to dial the police. I wanted to roll down the window and let him know that, but my friend did not want me to provoke him. So we ended up backing out of the lot, and shortly after he pulled out and left. We got his plates and reported it to the police, but it's so fucking weird. Anyone have any explanation for his behavior, or what he was doing. I'm a 15-year-old male living in Gothenburg, Sweden. I was on my way home from a party this Saturday. I was with a group of friends, all males. Me and 2 others were about to take the bus and went down this long road to get to the station. On the way there's this guy in an apartment building. He asked us if we were drunk or perhaps even high. We answered no. He just seemed like a funny drunk dude. He went on to say that he had a huge party in his apartment with both alcohol and drugs. We declined his offer because it felt creepy and also because we really needed to get home. We talked about this and realized that there's no party whatsoever. He was alone in his apartment, no music or any other voices or sounds in the background. I've been thinking about this, if he was joking with us or what his deal or motive actually was. What do you guys think? This took place around 5 years ago. I was driving to work, a 5-hour drive. It was already dark. About 3 hours of driving and I started getting tired. I bought myself a coffee and some snacks at a gas station and went on. But the snacks and coffee can only keep you awake for so long, and I started feeling tired again. This part of the road was nothing but thick, dark pinewood forest around me. No other cars on the road. Nothing. I was now extremely tired at the point I nearly drove off the road from almost falling asleep. I have to sleep now. I can't wait for a gas station. I need to stop as soon as I see a place I can park my car. Anything. When I'm tired, I fall asleep really fast. If I'm tired enough, I can fall asleep in the middle of a sentence when I'm talking. So it was a bit urgent for me to find a place where I could stop. It felt like an hour, but probably just 5 minutes go by and I spot a little pocket in the road. It's like a parking space for quick stops like peeing, switching drivers, and stuff like that. Not a real resting area. I stop here, roll down my windows to check if I heard any weird noises. Totally silent. I put the windows up again. Nothing bad is gonna happen. I haven't seen a car for like 30 minutes. This road is empty. If someone is checking on my car, I bet it would be the cops checking on me if I'm alright. I leave my keys in the ignition and lock my doors just to be safe. I adjust my seat a bit to make it more comfortable to sleep, and I take my shoes and put them on the passenger seat on the right. It was so nice to close my eyes, and I instantly fell asleep. I don't know why or what, but something wakes me up. I can't really see anything. Some kind of bright light hits me in the eyes. First I thought it was a flashlight, but then I realized that it's high beams from another car in my rearview mirror that is blinding me. I look in my left mirror and I can see a dude walking up beside my car. Maybe he wants to help or something. Should I make it clear to him that I'm in here? He is right beside my left back door. Should I step out and ask what he's doing? I didn't have to. The dude proceeds to jerk and pull on my left back door. I almost shit my pants when I realized he was trying to force his way into my car. My seat is adjusted for me to lay down. I can't reach the pedals, which makes it impossible for me to drive my car. I slam on the car horn and it breaks the silence with a roar and the dude jumps. That gives me about 2 seconds to push up my seat enough to reach the pedals. But it was still way out of adjustment, so I'm kind of pulling myself to the steering wheel because my seat is laying flat and isn't supporting my back. Anyway, I start my car and drive off with a cloud of smoke from my screeching tires. It's hard driving a car with nothing holding up your upper body, but I managed. As I leave, I look in the rear mirror and I see the dude standing there looking at me, and I can see 2 more guys coming up beside him. And from what I could see from the silhouette of the beams, one of them is holding something in their hand, like a wrench or maybe a crowbar. I drove off super fast, way over the speed limit. My whole body was trembling with adrenaline and fear. I drove like that for 30 minutes. Then I stopped at a gas station to fix my seat and to put my shoes on again. I figured out that I was only sleeping for about 10 minutes. Well, I didn't have to sleep until I got to my destination, which was surrounded by heavy-duty fencing, and the building has an alarm. I told my boss the next day, and they said they actually have problems with what they call, in Sweden, road pirates. Criminals that force you to stop on the road and rob you for everything, including your car, in that specific area. It could have just been 3 nice dudes that wanted to check out if I was okay. But then why wouldn't they knock on my driver's side window? The thing in his hand could have been a big flashlight. Be safe. So now that the case is over, I can finally talk about it freely. I figured I would share my story of the time I got kidnapped. This happened in 2021. I was 20 at the time and had just got off work around 11 p.m. and I went straight home to get ready to go out and meet some friends at a strip club. He messaged me via Facebook Messenger to hang out and smoke, and I told him I was meeting my friend and didn't want to hang out, so he offered to drive me to and from the strip club. Well, around 12:30 a.m., he came to pick me up and said he had to dump some garbage first. He had a couch in the back of his pickup truck, which I assumed was the garbage he was talking about. He said he made us margaritas, but I told him I didn't want to drink till I got to my destination, so we ended up smoking marijuana on the way to dump the couch. It was about a 20 to 30 minute car ride to where we wanted to dump the couch, and by the time we got to the destination, it was about 1:15 a.m. There was this logging road right off the side of the highway that goes for miles. He pulled all the way down to the end and left the couch there, then got back in his truck and started driving back towards the highway. But once we got halfway back to the highway, he stopped and put his truck in park, then pulled out a pipe and started smoking some more marijuana. After taking a hit, he turned his head to me and stared at me for a minute with a weird smirk on his face. Then all of a sudden he almost looked like he wanted to jump at me, but stopped himself in the moment with his hands and motioned like he was going to grab me. I got scared at this point and was frozen in shock, not knowing if it was a joke or not. I quickly realized it was not a joke and opened my door like I was about to get out, and he did the same. I closed my door and he closed his too. We ended up playing door tag and eventually got tired of it and got out of the truck and ran to my side. He opened my door and tried pulling me out by my legs, as I was trying to kick him and pull my phone out to call the police. Of course, my Face ID didn't work in that moment, and he ended up snatching my phone out of my hands. I kicked him hard enough to the chest, and he flew backwards, falling on his butt. I grabbed my purse and hopped out of the truck and started running towards the highway. I kept looking back to see how far behind me he was, and he gave me a head start before running after me. He grabbed me by my back of my shoulder and forcefully threw me down into a ditch. I landed on my stomach with one leg straight out and the other one bent in a weird angle. He sat on top of my legs and was holding my left hand behind my back. I screamed and begged him to bring me home and that I wouldn't tell him anyone. He got upset that I was screaming and tried to suffocate me with his other hand while still holding my left hand behind my back. I tried pulling his hand off my face with my right hand because it got to the point where I couldn't breathe. Finally, he let go of my face and I turned around to see what he was doing. And to my surprise, I watched him pull out zip ties from his jean pocket. He zip tied my hands behind my back, then forcefully pulled my panties off me. I had on a skirt and was laying on my stomach at the time. I remember digging my knees into the ground so he couldn't get them off. He didn't. He got up and started pacing, saying, "It shouldn't have happened this way. Just do what I say." I cried, telling him if he was going to do anything to me, put me back in the truck, and he did. I'm not going into details about this part of the story, but what I did notice was he pulled out a really small Ziploc baggie out of his jean pockets and pulled out a condom. I asked him what it was, and he said, "It's for protection." After all that went down, he got back in the truck. Mind you, I'm still tied up, and he drove me back to the highway and started driving around. I made up every excuse to get him to take them off of me, but he wouldn't. I asked for a cigarette. I don't even smoke cigarettes. And he lit one, smoked on it a bit, then held it to my mouth saying, "I'll hold it for you." At this point I thought to myself, what if I don't get myself out of this situation? I thought I was gonna die. I started saying things like, "You could be my sugar daddy, and I will pay for dinner tomorrow. If pussy is all you want from me, you could have just said that." He loved that so much that he started saying that he would put me on his life insurance policy so when he dies, I can get the money. I asked him if he would take the zip ties off. They were so tight and cutting off my circulation. He pulled to the side of the road and pulled out a mini pocket knife that was on his car keys and cut them off of me. It took a few tries because of how tight they were, and then he gave me my phone back. I had an Apple Watch on my wrist and asked him for it after noticing it wasn't on my wrist anymore. And he had this surprised look on his face and said, "We need to go back and get it." He turned around and we headed back to where this all had just happened. I got so scared and thought to myself, yep, this is it. I'm gonna die tonight and no one will know until someone finds my dead body. Once we got there, he told me to stay in the truck and got out to search a ditch for my watch. He came back to the truck after 5 minutes and said he couldn't find it, but that he would be back in the morning to look for it when the light's out. We got back to the highway and headed back to town. Once we got into town, he asked me, "What do you want to do now?" I said, "Bring me to my mom's house. I have to work in 4 hours and I'm tired." It was about 4 a.m. by this time. He brought me to my mom's. After getting to my mom's house, I looked up his name on Google. He was on parole for first-degree murder. He had served 17 and a half years in prison for murdering someone for their life insurance policy. I'm 25 now and I'm thankful I got to see another day. I was subpoenaed to testify against him, and he was found guilty November 6, 2023 of all charges. As of now, he has not been sentenced. A little bit of backstory. In my late teens, 18 to 19 years old, I was no longer getting along with my parents and decided to move out. When I was a freshman in college, I went to a school and lived in a dorm that was located in a busy city. Parking at the school meant trying to find street parking and having to pay a meter. I opted to park at my uncle's apartment complex, located a city away in the suburban town I grew up in. I would park at his apartments and take the bus downtown to my school. On the weekends when I wanted my car, I would take the bus back to the transit center near his apartment and walk back to my car. It was a little under half a mile. One weekend afternoon, I took the bus ride to go fetch my car. After getting off the bus, I started walking to the apartments. I noticed a girl walking a short distance ahead of me. She was probably 5 years older than me. Shortly after I noticed her, she noticed me and began to walk slower. It didn't take long until I caught up to her. She waited until I was next to her and asked me what time it was. Not thinking of anything and being polite, I answered. She continued walking with me and we made small talk. At this point, I thought she was just friendly. She informed me that she lived in the apartments that I was headed to. We continued walking and making small talk until I reached my car. When I got to my car, she started saying how nice it was, which was the first red flag. My car was a 91 Toyota Corolla, and by all accounts, not a very nice car. At this point, she started getting close to me as I was loading my backpack and items into my car. Her demeanor changed, and I could tell at this point that she was visibly trying to flirt with me. Now for context, I had a girlfriend at the time, who I was very faithful to, so this situation started to feel uncomfortable. She then asked me if I would come over with her to her apartment. I explained that I had a girlfriend and couldn't come with her. It was at that point that she crossed the line. As I was getting ready to get in the car and leave, she reached forward and grabbed my crotch, asking me if I was sure that I didn't want to come with her. I quickly swatted her hand away and firmly stated no. I quickly got into my car, turned it on, and backed out of the parking space, leaving her standing there bewildered that her forced attempt had failed. I left confused and uncertain of what just happened. Now, it's true that this could have just been a lonely girl that wanted company, but the length she went to. For the longest time, I looked at this memory as humorous, but as I've gotten older and pondered it more, I now see how dangerous that situation could have been. I wonder to this day what might have been waiting for me if I stupidly had followed her. My intuition tells me that I may have been mugged by her and possibly other people waiting in her apartment, but maybe I'm just paranoid. Either way, I'm glad I was smart enough to get out of that situation. I'm a female and was 6 at the time. So I was coming home from the movies. I was with my little brother, who was 3, so we were pretty small. First, we had to drop off my aunt, so my mom headed that way. I was just playing on my tablet, and we got to my aunt's house. My mom went inside with my aunt. 3 to 5 minutes had passed. I see a man walking by the car, and he opens the car door. I was in the back and quickly turned off my tablet, ducking a little. I glanced at my brother. I wanted to say something, but I didn't. I think he was asleep. It was pretty late. I heard him rummaging through my mom's cup holders. Then he closed the door and walked off with his hands in his pocket. Right after, my mom came out and she didn't see her phone. She took me and my brother inside my aunt's house and called the cops. I described the man and went home not thinking anything of it. I still wonder, what if he had other motives? What if he didn't see me or my little brother? It's not too scary, but I just think what would have happened. I've been really into the sub lately, and it's inspired me to share a few of my unnerving stories. This happened ages ago when I was 21. I was a manager for a big box store, but in a town that was an hour drive from me. I lived in a small town and the store was in another small town, both about 10K people each. But in order to promote to manager, I had to transfer, which meant doing a daily drive. I hoped it would be temporary because I dreaded driving these every day, especially late at night because of deer, etc. This was before cell phones were the norm. I did have one, but it was one of those ancient style phones, and I had just got it a week or two before. With these phones, you had to plug them into your car lighter in order to have them work, and they had a cord attached headset. Anyway, one night I was driving home and it was really late, about 1 a.m. The drive is pretty desolate, with houses sporadically throughout, mixed with sections of wooded areas. About 20 minutes before my town is a random casino. I had just passed this casino and a truck pulled out behind me. I didn't think anything of it, but it was noticeable pretty quick that they had been drinking because of their erratic driving. Because of this, I just figured I'd get as much room between us as possible. Also to note, as I was going past them, they had their headlights on of course, and could have easily seen that I was just a young girl by myself. So the truck comes up behind me at a pretty fast rate of speed and goes past me. As they are next to me, they swerve a little bit towards me, and I just think they are much more drunk than I thought, and started slowing down so they could easily pass. As soon as they got in front of me, they started to slow down, way down. It got to the point that we were going 20 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone and still slowing down, like they were trying to stop me. Every time they would get to around 5 miles per hour, I would swerve to the opposite lane and give it gas like I was going to pass them, which would make them temporarily speed up. I could also see a little bit better into the truck. It was an extended cab truck with what appeared to be 5 or 6 guys in it. This was during hunting season, so it wasn't out of the norm to see a group of guys acting ridiculous and drunk this time of year. So they were trying to stop me, and I didn't want to necessarily pass, given what just happened. At a certain point, I had to. So I had to go try and pass the truck, but it blocks me from doing so by getting in the middle of both lanes. I try a couple times with the same result. Then finally, I try to floor it and pass the truck, but it tries to run me off the road. I immediately get back behind them, and I'm freaking out at this point. I've tried to call 911, but there was a huge area of no coverage, and I couldn't get through. After what seems like forever, I finally get through to them, and they send someone out immediately. As I'm on the phone with them, I see car lights in my rearview mirror and filled with panic because I know this car would try to pass, given that we were going about 30 at this point. Sure as shit, this car comes up behind us and goes to pass, and sure as shit, this truck actually runs them off the road into a ditch. I'm telling the 911 dispatcher this and in full-blown panic. We were getting close to town now though, and I could see the first stoplight. I wasn't sure what the truck was going to do because the one lane splits into two and there are two gas stations up ahead. Right as we approach the first light, I see an officer come in the opposite direction and start flashing them over and over while telling the dispatcher that I see the officer. The officer makes a U-turn and gets between me and the truck. He flicks his lights on and pulls them over. They pull over into the gas station at the main intersection of town. I follow into the gas station to assist the police in whatever statements they need and make sure these assholes are actually arrested. That didn't end up being a problem because they refused a breathalyzer, so they were taken to a hospital where their blood alcohol level was obtained. I really wanted to know more, but the officer didn't elaborate. I kind of wish I would have called up and followed up on it. They never called me to do anything in court, so I guess they didn't need me. But it also means that they're getting away with only getting a DUI. I didn't realize this wasn't okay until way later, much too late to have done anything about it. All I know is the officer said that they were 3 sheets to the wind. God only knows what their intent was, but I was terrified to find out. And thank God for that damn bag cell phone. It could have saved my life. I have posted a few creepy encounters before, but my wife had just reminded me of an incident we had in 2017 when we were working in Utah. This happened in late November 2017 and was on a weekday. Can't remember exactly what day, but I knew it wasn't the weekend as the roads were pretty desolate. I was 33 at that stage and had been working for a family on a ranch for about 4 years. They had become like our second family. We were on work visas from South Africa, so not native to the US, but pretty familiar with everything, as we had been in the area for the 4 years we had worked for them. We decided to make a career and life change after I got burnout at 29 in the corporate marketing career that wasn't going anywhere and was stealing my soul and will to live. We just wanted to scale down and have a more relaxed lifestyle. The ranch was in northern Utah, somewhere between Salt Lake City and Logan. I'm pretty vague as the family is very well known and I would not like to identify them as I respect their privacy. We were almost getting ready to return to South Africa at that stage as our visas were running out. We wanted a bit of a holiday as it had been a busy year, getting married, our daughter was born, etc. We wanted to do a bit of sightseeing before we returned. The owner offered to pay for accommodations and provide spending money and his truck if we would run an errand for him on the way. He had a couple of horses and a trailer that needed to be picked up from a ranch somewhere in Wyoming, with Cheyenne being the closest big city more than an hour away. We jumped at the opportunity as we basically had a week to get there and then a day to get back to his ranch. We visited some awesome places: Park City, Flaming Gorge, Bear Lake, Yellowstone. The whole trip was an amazing experience except for the incident this story is about. That put a bit of damper on the excitement. We drove up to Park City the first day and spent the night with some friends. The incident happened on the second day of the trip. On the way between Flaming Gorge Reservoir and Bear Lake via Green River, we were driving and enjoying the scenery, and had just crossed over the Utah-Wyoming border when we spotted the only vehicle for the past 30-odd miles, an old red-brown pickup truck that was parked on the opposite side of the road. There were two guys inside. When we were about 150 feet from them, they pulled into the road and made a U-turn. I was pretty pissed as I was going 80 at the time, and had to make a hard brake and swerve into oncoming traffic to avoid having an accident with them. I punched on the horn and flipped the middle finger out the window when I passed them. They sped up, flashing their lights behind me, but I just punched it and left them behind. I was driving my employer's new Ram 2500 diesel truck, so there was no shortage of power to get away. A few miles down the road, I could not see them behind me anymore, so I assumed that they had turned off. Probably about 40 to 50 miles up the road, we pulled off into a little America to get diesel and some food. When we got out of the shop, we saw the truck parked across the lot, but no one was in it. We decided to load up and head out, as I was not in the mood for an argument with some redneck cowboys. We headed out and thought that was the last we would see of them. Boy, we were wrong. We were looking for interesting places to stop and things to see on the route, and about 45 minutes or so after we left the Little America, we spotted a sign that pointed to Fossil Butte National Monument. We pulled in and literally had the place to ourselves. We walked around and couldn't see much as it was closed, so we decided to head out. Right as we got to the truck, we spotted the red pickup speeding into the parking lot. I panicked. My wife jumped into the back with our 5-month-old daughter, and I ran and jumped into the driver's seat. Right as I wanted to pull out, the pickup pulled up behind us, blocking us from exiting. I was shitting bricks at this point, screaming to my wife to call 911. The guys jumped out of their truck and started running towards us, one on each side of the truck. Only then did I notice that both their faces were covered what looked like handkerchiefs, like what cowboys usually wear around their necks. Right at this time as well, my wife said, panicking, that she does not have cell service. I was making split-second decisions and noticed that, except the curb and signpost off to the left, there was nothing really solid in front of the truck. I threw the truck in drive, swung the steering to the right, and floored it. The truck plunged through some sagebrush and made a wide turn through the field, back towards the parking area. We raced to the exit. The layout of the parking area is one entrance. The road splits and the parking lot runs in a one-way loop that exits at the same entrance. If it doesn't make sense, pull up Google Maps with satellite view. That will explain it a bit better. We were parked at the far end of the parking lot, and we're now going through the parking lot the wrong way to get out. The other guys were back in their truck, racing to cut us off. They beat us to the entrance as they had a much shorter distance to cover than we did. They proceeded to park their truck sideways across the road by the gate, so there was no way we could get around them without causing serious damage to my boss's brand new truck. We stopped about 150 feet from them. One guy had an aluminum bat. Another had some sort of bar or tire iron that he was swinging around. My wife was crying in panic, our daughter was screaming, and I was shaking from adrenaline and fear. Even though the situation was still dodgy, I felt like we were out of immediate danger. The two guys did not move towards us, just standing next to the truck, staring us down. It felt like hours, but it was probably less than a few minutes. I told my wife to buckle our daughter in and look behind the seat for the rifle my boss kept there. She found it and passed it to me. I wasn't worried about the bat and bar, but in case one of them had a firearm. I did not want to make the situation worse, so was still contemplating whether I should use it if they approached and threatened us again, when I noticed a camper turning off the highway towards us. The two guys must have also noticed it, as they looked at each other, got in their truck, and sped off. They turned the way they came from, onto the highway, and when we could no longer see them, we started driving. We passed the camper, and an old couple gave us a friendly wave. We wonder if they knew that to us, they were angels sent from heaven that day. The story ends pretty anticlimactic, and we had a pretty amazing but uneventful rest of the trip. We told my boss what happened when we returned, and his explanation was that they probably were looking for trouble. That's why they cut us off with a U-turn, and then when people react to them, they start a confrontation. It sounded plausible. About a week later, when we were already back in South Africa, I was laying in bed thinking over the encounter when it struck me. From where we first encountered them when they cut us off until Fossil Butte was over 3 hours and close to 120 miles. You don't follow someone that far unless you have sinister intentions. They must have purposely followed us, as there are many different routes that would have led them away from us and turned off the interstate and made 2 or 3 turns since leaving Little America. That made me lie awake for a few more hours wondering what their intentions were and what would have happened if the old couple in the camper did not turn right when they did. This happened a couple months ago to me and my mom. We were driving home from my aunt's house, who lives in the middle of nowhere in the countryside. So we were on a pretty narrow and bumpy road, which my mom was not super confident driving on. The drive was going normal until a green car appeared behind us, presumably pulled out of some driveway or something. It was driving extremely close to us, pretty much tailgating us on the road that really did not require that since it was so empty. My mom, who was already uncomfortable on the country road, became nervous and decided to pull in at the next house or driveway that came up so they could overtake us. We did, and the car passed. We were both relieved that it was over, but we were wrong. We continued driving at a regular pace, and we didn't see the car for another few minutes. That was until we spotted it at the next house. The car had pulled in there and had its indicators on, meaning it hadn't stopped to park. My mom and I looked at each other, and to be honest, I started getting nervous myself, and I'm usually not frightened easily. The second we passed it, it pulled out and started tailgating us again. My mom was really scared now. The car would occasionally fall behind and intentionally race towards us at a crazy speed, which came across as them attempting to scare us. My mom increased the speed, but it kept up with us easily. I was sure that it was going to crash into us at this point, or run us off the road. This continued until we reached crossroads. My mom took the usual left, and I had no doubt that it was going to turn left too. However, it didn't. It continued straight ahead, as if nothing ever happened. I never saw who was in the car, and it still puzzles me. Why the hell would they pretty much be harassing 2 strangers who had stopped to let them pass after they made it clear that they wanted to? I just can't figure out their intentions other than perhaps being an unhinged driver who was having a bad day. I really thought my mom and I were going to be attacked or worse. One of the weirdest things that's happened to me while on the road